Hello everyone, my name is Extreme. I'm the #1 Minesweeper player on Touhou Daisenjou. And today I'll be teaching you exactly what I do to become the richest as well.
Here comes the money.
So, Minesweeper actually makes a huge amount of money, especially on the weekends because there's a weekend bonus, so then that becomes a multiplier of 2. And so the rate becomes 0.8 yen per tile. This makes Minesweeper the fastest money making method by far, and is what has made me the richest by far, and there's literally nobody who's closer, as far as I know. Not to brag, of course, I'm just trying to get people excited for Minesweeper. This tutorial is going to assume that you know at least a bit of Minesweeper solving. Now, let's just get started. Okay, so let's mark the corners. In Minesweeper, there's a thing called chording, and what that is when you click a number while there's the exact amount of marked flags next to it, then you can reveal multiple squares at once. So for example, there's a 1 here, and this 1 is attached to this mine here, and we've marked it. So if we click it, it'll do these surrounding ones. So we can do the same thing right here. So this 1 is attached to here, and it'll, if I click it, it surrounds, it does the surrounding. And again, I can do it one more time. Look at this, we can see that there's 2 mines that are marked, and there's a 2 in the middle, which means if you click this, it'll chord. And it'll chord again. And same here, we can chord again. Now, you might be wondering, do I really need to chord? The answer is basically yes. However, even though the top players don't actually do any chording necessarily, it's good for you to do it because they're very much the simplest way in order to gain speed. What we're trying to maximize is efficiency after all. An important thing to mention about chording is that you have to chord by marking all the correct mines. If you mark incorrect mines, like for example right here, if I chord this, oh, I got lucky. If I chord this, for example, this 3, I die. This is because chording doesn't actually give information. All it does is it checks, okay, is the number equal to the marked mines? If yes, then reveal all the surrounding squares that aren't mines next to the number that we just chorded. So for this 3, we mark these 3, so the other squares around here are all chorded. At your level, you should probably basically always be chording. Chording only really makes sense, technically, if you can save clicks. So here, for example, if I know there's a mine here, so if I click the 1 here, I saved 4 entire clicks. And same again here, there's a 2, if I do 1 right click and then 1 left click, that's 2 clicks instead of 3. And also, another upside is that there's less thinking if you just have to chord. You know, you're just clicking numbers, and as long as you've marked correct mines, there's no way of dying, and you're still revealing squares. So technically, it's always good. Now, here's a very common pattern that most people actually don't know of because they know of more sophisticated patterns. The 2-1 pattern. So anytime there's a 2 and a 1, just like this, and there's 2 air blocks right above it, then we know that on the 2 side, diagonal of it is 1 mine, and on the 1 side, diagonal of it is a free square. Technically, this pattern alone is what encompasses literally every other pattern. You can basically use this fact to derive every single other pattern. Now, for this 1-2 pattern, can you tell me which square is the mine and which square is safe? That's right. This is the mine, and this is safe. Now we're going to cover a little bit more advanced stuff. For example, you see this wall here? We don't really see where exactly this should go, right? There's something here. However, look at this. This is on a border here, and there's a 1, which means one of these must be the mine. However, it can't be both of them. It's just one of them. But look, in both cases, this neighboring one right here, this one is always satisfied, which means for either of both of these cases, this one has this square right over here as safe. So therefore, that is the safe square. And what does that tell us? Well, look, this 2 over here. Look at that. Boom. And now we've solved it. So we can apply this trick yet again. So this bottom one here, it has to be one of these 2. And so this one is always satisfied, meaning this is safe. And now look at this one right over here. It has to be one of these two, but not both. But in both cases, this middle one is also safe, meaning these three squares are also safe. Now look at this, another one over here, which means one of these two, in which both cases, this one is always satisfied, which means these three are also safe. Here's a great example that basically combines a bunch of different things we've learned. So, a 1-2 pattern here. Oh, there's a 2-1 pattern here, but we've already satisfied it. But we can still use it for this. And now look at this one over here. There's that's one of these two squares, in which case this one in between is always safe, so these surroundings are safe. And look again, it's one of these two, and this one is always satisfied, which means its surroundings are also safe. What I just taught you is how to brute force basically any simple pattern. However, brute forcing is pretty tedious and time consuming, so it's not really worth it. Instead, it's better to just memorize and get your instincts up. And here we can apply the same trick again. One is here, it's one of these two, this is safe. And, oh, one of these two, which means these three are also safe. And look at here, this is a bit of a more the same thing, but one here, one of these two, in which case, both of these cases, this two is safe. Boom. And now, if you look at it again, this two is in one of these two. In both cases, this one is satisfied, this is safe. And you get the picture. We could even combine it and say, hey look, there's a one over here, so it's one of these two. And we know there's one for these, so it's one of these two. In both cases, this 2 is satisfied, meaning, well, these are the 4 possibilities, so mine could mean either of those. However, there's no possibility that a mine is here. And boom. Did you go to elementary school? I'm guessing you have. So, this is the next thing I'm going to teach you. It's called subtraction. So, you see how there's a mine right here, and there's a 2 right here? So, if you subtract 1, because of this mine being here, we will get a 1-to-1 pattern, which means boom. And enforcing the combination thing one more time, you see this 3 here? It must be one of these two, which means all 3 of those squares are safe. Here we can subtract for yet another pattern. If we subtract this bottom one and this top one, we'll be left with 1, 2, 1. Alright, here's an advanced example of subtraction. If you subtract these 2 mines from the 4, we get a 2. And if you subtract these 2 mines from this 3, we get a 1. That's a 2-1 pattern, so that means there's a mine here, and this is the 1, so this is safe. Now, let's get on to speed strategy. The actual tile reach that you have in this game is basically just 4 tiles away. I mean, it's not very far, which means you have to stay pretty close. However, you still want to stay relatively close to the center because you can then pivot, so that's why it's nice to have the hoverboard on hand. Next thing you want to do is go for the most efficient clicks first. So for example, here I know it's these 2. However, there's no point of marking this. And I can see this 1 over here can be very easily marked, and I can click it. And boom, I did 4 squares. And that's the one I was looking at first because it was close to me and it yielded the biggest results, which is 4 for just 2 clicks. Here's an example of a bad chord, and you might actually encounter it starting out. And you're thinking, oh, there's a bunch of bombs here. I should mark all of them and then solve. This is actually the bad approach because if there's a lot of bombs, that means there's a lot of extra flagging. When in fact, that means there's also fewer tiles that you need to actually click. So in this case right here, there's a 3. So I could say mark these 2 and then chord. However, I could have just done 2 clicks instead of 1, 2, and then a chord. This chord over here, marking these 2 mines and then clicking here, is not a bad chord because even though that was 3 clicks and I did only reveal 3 squares, which means it's 3 for 3, it's the exact same. This extra mines that we marked yields an opportunity for another chord. Lastly, there's one last very important thing about grinding. This mechanic is actually pretty important for grinding. So, I just completed a board, and now you can see the streak is 0. Now look what happens when the next board comes. If you catch that, The board size has gotten a bit bigger. And not only that, there's also just more mines generally, so the mine density is higher. So why is that important? That means the chance for 50/50s is higher, the chance we mess up is higher, and in general takes more time to solve. This means that for grinding money, this is not the ideal strategy, and especially not for trying to make our runs as quick as possible. However, Streak is its own category, and it can be fun, and it's challenging for your solving skills. And now, if I go to the next board, boom, it's even bigger now. As you can see, this board is pretty huge, and it has so many mines, and yet, look, we have this small bit at the end where it's just a 50/50 now. As you can see here, that was just with a streak of 2, and I have 212 right here. So you can see that it steadily keeps going, and it gets harder and harder and harder. This means then that if you want to grind, you should make sure your streak is at 0, or basically every single time you win, just die on purpose and then restart. Alright, that's basically it for this tutorial. There's stuff I did leave out, but they're very, very minor things, and you'd probably discover it yourself just from playing a bit. Note that this is just Minesweeper after all, a very old game with a lot of speedrunning history. So speedrunning Minesweeper is not at all a new thing. I just learned on by searching up videos online, and I'll link a few in the description. But yeah, check those videos out because they're also extremely well made. Of course, this one was a bit more focused on the nuances of Daisenjou, but of course you can apply all those videos in order to help you with solving Minesweeper generally. Alright, that's all for me folks. See ya.